Welcome to Better, the podcast about doing better, being better, and leaving the world a better place than we found it. What's up, guys? How's it going? Guys and ladies. Are we allowed to say that anymore? Just guys? I don't know. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Better, the podcast about, as I say in the intro, doing better, being better, and making the world a better place. So I have episodes that have guests, and some of the episodes are just me talking with you guys about how I've done things to make my life better, to make me better as a human being. And this one's gonna be an interesting one, because this one is one of those ones where I get a lot of shit when I talk about this topic. And I feel like it's because a lot of people have not confronted their demons. It's gonna be a tough one. I'm gonna use references in my own personal life, people that I know, to make my point. But before I do that, the whole point of this podcast is for myself and my guests to tell you guys about our stories about trying to become better people. And I have to say it. I'm going to say it a lot in the earlier episodes. I probably won't say it much down the road because I'm hoping people will listen to a few of the episodes before, on the earlier ones. But this isn't about advice. This isn't about self-help, selling you something, none of that kind of stuff. This is literally just us sharing our stories because myself and my guests have gone through it. I mean, we have lived hectic lives and we have absolutely gone through some shit. And through going through all that, we have figured out who we are and who we want to be. So hopefully my story, my guest stories will, make some of you out there go, they did it that way. I didn't think about it from that angle. Or maybe it makes you think, wow, that is possible. Or I'm so happy that somebody else feeling that way, or somebody else has gone through that. But again, I'm not a therapist or anything. I have no training at all in self-help or, self-love or any of that kind of stuff. If you feel like you're super troubled, I always suggest to people the BetterHelp app. It's a great app that gives you virtual counseling, video, text, audio, whatever. So if you feel like you need help, and I feel like everybody does at some point, please go to BetterHelp or to a therapist or something like that just to get your help. This is not the intent of the podcast. The intent of the podcast is not to solve your problems. It's to get you thinking. Okay. So like Bobby, the coach Lowen said in one of the podcasts, how did he put it? It's not to answer your questions. It's to make sure you're asking the right questions. So I'm going to talk about relationships. Everybody's favorite topic. Not relationships with your family, not relationships with your friends, relationships with people that you are either trying to just have sex with, that you're trying to, spend time with, that you're trying to marry, whatever. I don't have a lot of great examples of really stellar relationships. To put it in perspective for you, my grandmother left my grandfather after 51 years of marriage. Like, when I say that out loud, sometimes I sit there and go, who has ever done? My grandma might be the first woman in history to leave a husband after 51 years of marriage. Have you ever heard of anybody doing that, Ben?
Not after 50 years. No, that's
a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a long time. And the crazy part of it was that after she left him, they ended up, they sold the house. And they ended up moving a block or 2 blocks away from each other across the city. Like, it was just so, and they spent time together. I'm like, I don't understand how this works. I was still, youngish. So I was like, what is happening here? I come from, my parents got divorced in my early adulthood. There's tons of divorce around me. Lots of friends and family that have been divorced, cheating, domestic abuse, not in my family. I'm going to be very clear. The domestic abuse was not, my mom, my dad, my grandparents, anybody in my family, just people that I've met, a lot of domestic abuse happening out there. So much cheating, unbelievable amounts of cheating. and just really unhealthy relationships. And my early relationships, I I'm kind of a grandiose guy. I like the big things. Like if I proposed one time and it involved 250 people. Okay, I do the fire. I'm the fireworks show guy. I'm the rent the theater out guy. That's the kind of stuff I like to do. Um, and I used to do that and think, well, I'm the best boyfriend ever. Turns out not so much. Because all that stuff was covering for the little details that I just didn't pay attention to enough. Um, what I'm about to tell you, all these things I'm about to tell you, they're gonna sound really bad, okay? And that's the whole point of this is I'm better. And the way I know I'm better is the person I'm dating now. So her name is Shauna, and I will tell you, me as a human being, 2 years ago, just 2 years ago, when I first swiped on her and she didn't pay attention to my swipe on Bumble, I did not deserve her. Not by a long shot. I still was very much mentally and emotionally immature, and she's light years ahead of where I'll ever be in terms of emotional maturity. She's a absolutely she's damn near angelic. She's pretty amazing. She's a really good human. She lives her life in service of others. She has raised two amazing boys. She just everybody that meets her is like, that girl just lit up the room, lit up my life, lit up my soul. Like she's just one of those people that it's like Hansel and Gretel on the trail of breadcrumbs, but her breadcrumbs are goodness. So I can say, as I talk about these things, just know that I evolved enough I got better, and I finally feel like, having met Shauna, that I deserve her. So let's take a trip back now. We'll go to my very first real relationship is with this girl named Leanne. I can't remember her last name. Oh no. I don't think it matters, right? Probably shouldn't use the last name. Yeah. This girl named Leanne, and I remember I tried to make her a spaghetti candlelight dinner, and I think it was like 12, 13, something like that. And I didn't know how to cook, first off, and I did it in broad daylight in a unfinished basement, and it was horrible. And quickly thereafter, we broke up. And I remember going, well, I did this nice thing, like, she should like me. Why doesn't she like me? And I was like super heartbroken. And then I got into more relationships, and I just never learned my lesson. I was always like doing these things, these out of the box things, these grandiose things, these, things that they didn't even ask for. That's a big one, which I'll talk about in a second. But I was doing all these things that I thought, I'm like, that should earn me the love and admiration everybody looks for. First of all, nobody owes you shit. That's the first thing you got to realize. You're only owed what you put in, and if somebody's not putting in that same energy, then you're not owed. They're not owed. Nobody's owed, and then you should probably break up. Not my advice, just what I've experienced. And so then I go through this path of relationships, and several I was cheated on. I've never cheated myself, but I was cheated on, and I thought, what an injustice! How dare they? I did nothing to deserve this. Nobody deserves to be cheated on. And then I saw somebody that got cheated on in my life, and he was very bitter, and he would not listen to the fact that maybe he had a role in it too. And the people around him, they wouldn't listen to it either. And I thought to myself, I'm like, but wait, like he was not great for years. And then finally she went and cheated. And it almost felt to me like, why did it take her so long? Now, I'm not saying cheating is ever right. Don't get me wrong. I think that if you're in a relationship and you're not happy and things are not going well, you should absolutely break up. Okay? Don't cheat. But I kind of understand cheating a bit more. Because it's very rare that someone goes and cheats unless they're a real piece of shit human being without it being a reaction to something. It's rarely ever an action. It's almost always a reaction. Now there's different degrees of how it could have been dealt with and all that. I understand all that. I'm not negating any of that. I'm not saying any of that is insignificant data. But what I am saying is if let's say I'm in a relationship with someone and they're acting a little wild or whatever, they're doing some stupid shit, and I say, look, I'm not good with this, right? And they keep doing it. And I keep saying to them, like, I told you, like, I'm not good with this, and I'm not happy, whatever. And they keep doing it, and I go and cheat. Now, first of all, I suck because I cheated. But they suck because they were not willing to work on the relationship. And that's for one of the biggest, that was probably the biggest lesson. That was definitely my moment when it came to relationships. That was my better moment, where I sat there and I was like, oh, I get it now. I get why I was cheated on. Right. And I never really forgave, because I don't think that's something you can forgive, but I definitely I was able to get past it. And then I got into a couple more relationships and dated a bunch and all that. I was a bit of a serial dater for a while. And it dawned on me that my next problem was I was replacing the little things with these big grandiose things. I was doing these big grandiose things because I felt very uncomfortable in the idea of being vulnerable with someone, right? So, and the other bad thing was I was with people that were pretty bad at vulnerability as well. So it was just a recipe for disaster. So I had to really figure that out. I'm like, how do I go about just being better at being a boyfriend, or, eventually maybe a husband one day or something? And something really obvious occurred to me. And I'm sure it'll be a common theme on this podcast. It's that I couldn't really even look in the mirror and be happy with what I was staring back at. And how the hell am I going to possibly pull off something with somebody else if I can't even pull off looking at myself? So then I went on this big journey. I'm like, be honest with yourself. Look back at your relationships. Look back at those moments where you knew you fucked up, or you knew something was wrong, or you knew they were lying, or you knew you were lying, or you knew, and you ignored it. You stored it back in your subconscious, and you let it go because you didn't want to make the situation uncomfortable. You didn't want to have uncomfortable conversations, whatever. And now look at what caused those things. Was it them? Was it you? Be honest about it. Because once you start doing that, once you do an inventory of your past relationships, that is when you start to get into having some positive present and future relationships. And now a celebrity better moment with Tiffany Alvord.
I was here singing with the angels up in heaven. Hey Jay, I think that is amazing that you share this question and just ask a ton of different people, because I feel like this is a very telling question. Okay, so what is a moment I knew I had to do better, and what did I do to do better? Honestly, I feel like there's moments in my life, whether I'm going through something challenging or just overwhelming, where sometimes I just get a little bit in my head. But I think one of the things where, whether it's getting on a workout routine or getting myself the motivation to get through the day or the tasks at hand, or to just pick myself up and say, no, you're going to go to this social event, literally any situation, I feel like this advice has helped me reframe things. And this is it. It's very simple. What would the best version of yourself do? And then do it. And I feel like that question, when I ask myself, it makes me pick up into this superhero version of myself that I can then be able to just snap out of the mindset that's keeping me back. It helps me get out of my head, because you get out of the thinky brain and you get into the action brain of the what ifs, the hows, the okay, I know what the best version of myself would do because I've been that version of myself, and then I just do it. So yeah, I feel like that advice is probably my biggest piece of life hack that helps me to overcome those darker times. And I wouldn't say there's like a particular moment, but I feel like, yeah, just kicking old habits with new ones by using that and being the hero in my own story. Like if I think of my life as a movie, that also helps, because I'm like, well, I'm not gonna want to be the person who's just like complaining about my life, crying about whatever the situation is. I want to be the person who's like making things happen and like reaching out to others and like bigger than myself. Another thought is life is too big to live small, and that's kind of been my motto this year, because I feel like it's true. In every element of life, there's so much beauty, and we rob it by getting hyper focused on like random details or random things or situations that bring us down, versus taking a step back and being like, no, this is still beautiful, even in the pain, even in the struggles, and we're gonna overcome it. So yeah, with work, with relationships, I feel like it's always getting over the hump of like that motivation, or in relationships, like speaking up. That's something I'm learning to do. So it's like, you know, you just need to be brave enough, because today is a good day and now is a good time. That's another saying that I love. My dad said it before he passed away, and I just hold it dear to my heart, because there's no day more beautiful than the present. And so now is the time. If life is too short to live small, and it's too short to procrastinate things, if it's the inevitable, like let's just let the flow of life happen and move on to the next thing. But also easier said than done. Thank you for loving Cracked Open and for listening. Thank you for asking me this question. I hope you are doing well, and I hope your podcast listeners are doing well, and I hope that you guys get a little insight from this. All right, I will talk to you later, and thanks. Bye. But now I look back and I'm like, oh, baby Tiffany, and I have a soft spot for her, because I'm like, I know what you're gonna go through, and you're doing so good. Just keep going.
So, for example, I'll give you an example of something I do very different with Shauna than I did with anybody else. I realized the second that I knew that we were in it for the long haul, I let her get into the deepest recesses of my brain, and I told her everything. The ugly, the uglier, the ugliest, the good, everything. I told her about where I, developed my relationship habits. I told her about the things I don't like about myself, the things that I do like about myself. I told her about the things I didn't like about partners. I just let it all out. And she did the exact same thing. And holy shit, is that freeing. I mean, I have never felt so relaxed in a relationship in my entire life. There's no worry, there's no ambiguity, there's no resentment off of the bat, which is really difficult because I've always had a little bit of resentment right out of the gate. There's this like we're partners in crime. We're absolutely looking to build the same kind of life, to end up with the same kind of retirement plans, we'll call them. Not really retirement plans, but like end of life, like later in end of life. Jesus, that sounds so grim. Like later in life ideals for what we want our life to look like. And I don't think we could have ever arrived at those conclusions had we not been very honest with each other, but not just honest, but like super exposed. I've never felt more, what's the word? I've never felt more, I guess, naked with someone in my entire life. Like when I told her, because I have a few things that everybody has those things they don't show the world, right? They don't tell the world. And when I did that, when I showed that, and at first she was like, "Are you real? This is you? Seriously?" But then she took the time to like consider the motives behind things and the reason I do things, and she's like, "Okay, I get it. I understand it, and it's part of you, and I accept it." Like, wow, most grown up shit I've ever done in my entire life. I'll tell you, it was pretty cool. So what I'm trying to say is, what I learned the hard way the decades-long way, I took the super scenic route to get here, is that very, very rarely in any kind of relationship is it ever one-sided that somebody did something wrong. You know, it's funny because like when you're, you know, like I'd go to Salisbury House, it's this restaurant here in Winnipeg with my boys all the time, and they would tell me these ridiculous stories about how their girls wronged them, and I was like, I feel like something's missing. I feel like it might be like leaving out some details here. But you know, they always swore, this is how it happened. This is what was up. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. And then later on, like, let's say I run into the girl and she'd tell me the story and it's like completely different. Right. And I'm like, wow, how can two people go through the exact same experience and have completely different interpretations of it? Because they're not like, I'm removing malicious intent out of it, because I like to believe that the vast majority of people don't have malicious intent. It's just really bad communication. It's really bad. It's two people not understanding how to tell each other, this is what I don't like. This is what we need to work on. And if we can't, we need to break up. Because breaking up is scary, especially if you've been with somebody for a long time. Now, my longest relationship has been 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days. Okay. Like that was the whole relationship. That's not like my 3 top longest relationships. 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days, my longest relationship. And I know that doesn't seem like a lot, and it probably isn't for some of you out there. But when we broke up, it was like, now what? 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days of my life is a lot of time. That's that whole period that now what? Didn't matter. And then that's when you entered, you know, door number 3, which was it all matters. We go through these things. This is why I like have a really hard time with things like the Bible and premarital sex and all these things that people talk about. I can't imagine marrying the first person I saw who I've never slept with, I've never lived with, I've never gone through shit with. That's a wild concept, and people used to do that all the time. I'm sure there are people out there that still do that. I just couldn't imagine it, because that relationship that lasted just over 2 years, and every relationship that I've had, they allowed me to learn, allowed me to grow enough, to get better enough to be able to get Shauna. And I could imagine being myself today, and that, like my old self today, and meeting someone and me being like, okay, we're getting married, and this, and having never gone through all those lessons. I don't know how you can have a healthy relationship like that. So, look, when it comes to cheating is wrong, but cheating is, like I said, usually a reaction. It's not it's very rarely an action, unless again the person sucks. And it's one of those things where if you've been cheated on, don't just get resentful. Don't get angry. I mean, do a little bit, but after you're done with that, like lick your wounds for a weekend or something, and then just look inside and figure out what it is you did to contribute to the situation, because I guarantee you that you did something for the situation. So, you know, and then when you look at, when you're examining, when you're getting out of relationships and you're dealing with breakups and everything, again, examine what it is you did right and what you did wrong, because I guarantee you that you did both. And that's why you're not together anymore. Nobody breaks up because the relationship is awesome. Nobody's like, you know what, baby? We are amazing. We have the best relationship ever. Let's break up. No. And also look at what they did that you're non-negotiable. This is something I learned from a guy who's one of the #1 network marketing trainers in the world. His name is Eric Worre. And he said to me, you got to make a list of your non-negotiables. He ended up marrying Marina, who I spent a lot of time with them. Amazing couple, very interesting couple, and they had this list of non-negotiables. And they met in Russia. He lived in the States in Minneapolis. She lived in Ukraine, and he had already made his list of non-negotiables that he had for a relationship. And what was not on that list was distance. So they were like, Okay, and it wasn't on her list either. Distance was not a non-negotiable. So him living in Minneapolis, her living in Odessa, in Ukraine, they started dating, going back and forth. And then she, just, I won't get too much more into the story because I don't know how much they want me to say, but I know that this part is a common part of the story. If you met, that's what you have to do. You got to make a list of non-negotiables. One of my non-negotiables, you can't be a heavy drinker because I don't drink. You can drink if you want, it's fine, but if you're a club girl that's getting hammered every weekend, I'm not dating you, right? No matter what your age is. If you've got this, if you're like, what's a couple more non-negotiables before I go? Another non-negotiable is you can't have a job that is within the sphere of relevance to stripping or hooking of any kind. Not because I got anything against strippers, not because I think being a hooker is wrong, not because I think the sex trade is bad, just because I can't do it. There are some people, I have a friend who's dated a stripper for like 10 years. Loves the girl. I'm so happy for them. They're a great couple. Not for me. And I'll give you one more non-negotiable. Another non-negotiable for me is being rude to people you don't know. I hate that. That is the worst. And there's the waiter test. I'm sure you guys have heard of this, where you go to a restaurant and you see how the person acts with the wait staff, and if they treat them well, or if they don't treat them well, you know that that's how they treat people as a whole. That is a non-negotiable for me. If I'm on a date and someone has said, to the waiter, why don't you just hurry up? Like, you're doing such a horrible job, and da-da-da, and like give them a 0% tip because they were 2 minutes late with our food and treating them like shit. That's over. It's cut. That's a non-negotiable. So, anyways, that is another way I got better. I learned from my previous relationships. I looked at what I did wrong. I looked at what I did right. I looked at what they did wrong. I looked at what I did. I looked at what they did right. I built out my list of non-negotiables. I spent the time to learn what works and what doesn't, and I got Shauna. And you know what? Just because I think you guys need to understand how amazing this girl is, I'm gonna get you won't have it now, but we'll splice in a picture of us. Actually, the producer on our first date, the producer of this podcast, one of the producers, Skylar, on our first date, he happened to be out in downtown Winnipeg, and he was doing some street photography on our first date, and he did some street photography of us. So we'll throw up a couple of those pictures at the end. I just want you guys to understand, when I say she's amazing, she's also way gorgeous, right? So like 185 out of 10. What am I? I'm 7, 6, 5, somewhere in there. So, pretty awesome. So I got better in relationships enough that I could find someone who I actually could see forever with. And you guys can too, and I hope you do. And if you're struggling out there with relationships and all that, start with these things if you can, if you feel this is what's right for you. And I would also, seek out a therapist, seek out BetterHelp or whatever, to see if you can work through some of those issues if you can't figure them out for yourselves. All right? That's it for another personal episode. Next one will be one of the guests. Very excited every time I have a guest in the studio, because then I shut up and they talk and they tell their stories and they get vulnerable in front of the camera, which is always a good thing. If you enjoyed this or enjoy any of our episodes, please subscribe. I would love you to subscribe to the podcast, to the YouTube channel, whatever, and let's get better together. Later. Thanks for checking out Better. If you get a chance, subscribe. Hopefully, together, we'll make the world a much better place.